going live, and then I'll just yeet it onto the... We're live. Okay, so welcome everyone. We've had some technical difficulties, but this should be the last of it. So I'll just make sure that that's all fine on there. The quality may be a little terrible, but at the end of the day, it's about our pearls of wisdom that we're going to be imparting on you all. So it's about the quality of our voices and the information that we're passing to you. So just remember that in the end. I'll bring up the stream on my phone so I can see what's happening and answer any questions. And that should be good. I don't know. Is that me or you breathing, James?
It might be me.
Try breathing. Okay, that's actually right. Okay, no, I think we're good.
Okay.
All right, so I'll just wait a second for people to get into the chat, and thank you everyone for being patient. I realise it's taken a little while to get this sorted, but thank you very much. I do appreciate the patience, and we should be in for a good one. All right.
Can they see us?
Yes. Can you see us? Let me know if you can.
Faces.
I mean, James, you're going to get all the first comments. Let's be real. Just like in the other video with you in it, you know. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to read those too much.
Yeah, we'll see.
My ego can't handle them.
The huge James ego.
The biggest.
All right. Can you all see us? Just let me know if you can see us and hear us, and if it's not too terrible, the quality.
Is it just recording your monitor screen?
Yeah, it
looks
should
like
be.
On here, it's like your YouTube studio for me.
Has it got? Honestly, this is why. Right. Why is it doing that and not what's on my screen? Window capture. Groove music.
Yeah, they can see your software.
They can see my software. Yes, the one that I installed 10 minutes ago. Now, how do I change this?
Is Discord like on your screen?
Yeah, Discord's open on my screen, but okay, let's just try this. What did that do? Okay, there might be another. Let's go with display catcher. Isn't that just with the capture cursor?
Now they're just getting a black screen.
Now it's getting a black screen. Okay. Now if I OK this,
which is maybe improving.
Has that changed it at all, or is it still black?
Ooh, that's a diff.
Black screen. Aha, yes, okay, nice. Okay, now if I go into here, I know I'm a boomer. I'm not even old enough to be a boomer, but I am one. Okay, now it should soon flip so that you can see my face and James's face sweaty and trying to figure out how this works because I'm such a boomer before my time. Okay, if it doesn't flip, I'm going to be very sad, but it should do very soon. And then we'll finally be ready to go. This is the technological, a whole almost hour after we were meant to start, this boomer has figured out how it works. Yes. Oh, there. Wow. Look at that. The lag here is just the best. This is like a full 30 seconds. Perfect. A full 30 seconds. This is exactly the highest quality streaming. You're recording stuff now Yes. Okay, I think we're good. I now see your faces. Thank you, Jakob. Thank you, Jakob. Yes, this could be any Norwegian Danes. I watched. The reply. Oh, you what?
Right.
That was my first video. The reply to Lindy Beige, when he was talking about the Last Kingdom. Now the only thing is that on my screen I'm not going to be able to look at the document, so we're just gonna. If you can get the document up, James, you can sort of keep me.
I do have the document.
Nice. He has the document. Boomer cringe. Yes, it's very true. This is incredible boomer cringe. I take complete responsibility for that there. All right, okay. Well, with that, I think we should definitely get started.
Perfect.
Yeah. So, everyone, just to let you know, this is James. James is one of my friends and colleagues. He's appeared on the channel before in some of the reenactment videos and vlogs. He's busy stabbing me with a spear and various other implements. But I'm talking with James today because James and I are both fans of The Last Kingdom, which I'm guessing you guys are as well if you're watching this. And James is also a fellow colleague of mine at Anglo-Saxon, Norse and Celtic, which is the degree that I study in Cambridge. So we wanted to talk a little bit about The Last Kingdom, Season 4, what's going to be happening. No spoilers, though. We're just going to be... We've both read the books, so we promised to not talk about what actually happens in the books, but rather to look at the history more broadly.
Yeah.
So, James, are you excited for Season 4?
I am. I feel like the series have just got better, like, as they've got along. I think as the budget's like increased, Netflix has come in. I would say there's definitely been an improvement.
That's true, but still the rectangular shields, though.
That is the biggie. Yeah, the rectangular shields are annoying.
It gets me every time. It's the shields are potentially the worst thing because they're the most obvious thing. But then you've also got the helmets that the Danes are wearing that just look like they've been bought from a toy shop. Like quite literally, they look plastic and like they're these tiny helmets.
All the leather as well.
All the leather. Like honestly, sometimes I question whether it's really a PG show. All the leather that appears in it, like it's pretty terrible. Honestly, and the arm guards and everything, it's a sad time. The fur, like the huge, just bulky bits of fur on the shoulders, and it's like no, fur is like small amounts in small areas, right? But hey ho, I guess that's what's going to be happening. So okay, before we start talking about season 4, season 3, where did that end? Can you remember where the TV show ended with season 3?
It ended with the battle of the Holm and the death of Ethelwald, wasn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think it's they portray it as being in a forest, right? And there's this huge fight with the Danes and stuff. But
that was a bit weird.
It was quite weird, especially if you've kind of read accounts of the battle, because that's not at all what happened. Actually, the West Saxons lost the Battle of the Holm, so against the Danes. And it was fought in Kent. Was it in Kent, or was it the Kentish contingent?
Like Essex,
I think
maybe.
Yeah, I think you're right. Actually, yeah.
Because it was after Edward had an excursion into East Anglia, I believe.
An excursion sounds really chill. Like he's just going on a holiday into East Anglia.
He had a bit of a holiday in East Anglia. Yeah.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, so if I can remember, I did make some notes before this, but I think as you say that like Edward's moving into the Danelaw because East Anglia at that time is what's now referred to as the Danelaw, so the Danes ruling there. But then he was already retreating out. Now, Ethelwald was Ethelwald was Alfred's nephew, so that makes him a cousin.
So his cousin.
Yeah, that makes him Edward's cousin. So he's the son of Ethelred, who was Alfred's brother and ruled beforehand, and he rebels against Edward. Did he already rebel in 900 when Alfred dies, or is it sort of 901?
Yeah, I think he rebelled in 899 when Alfred died.
Right.
But then I think he fled to Northumbria, I think.
Yeah, there's even he even starts minting coins. There's coins that have been found from the Danelaw in his name, and it kind of says they accepted Ethelwald as king, which I thought that the show kind of made it a little bit funny that he kind of runs up north and he's like this puny character around all these huge Danes, like, oh no, I can be useful, trust me. Yeah, but the Battle of the Holm, it was a defeat for the West Saxons. I think it was the Kentish contingent that got cut off from the main West Saxon army. They were surrounded by Ethelwald's army by the Danes, and they were all killed to a man. But Ethelwald died in the battle, so despite his side actually having won the battle, he died, and the whole rebellion collapsed. And really quite different to what they show in the films. But that's the end of season 3. But where do you think season 4 is going to go? What do you think the big climax is going to be?
Well, you have the Battle of Tettenhall in 910, which I guess that would make sense because that wouldn't be too long after, but still have a few years in between.
I think so, yeah, because I think that the end of season 3 is sort of 902, and I know the writer Bernard Cornwell, he sort of leaves, he jumps over gaps quite a bit. But I wonder if they are. I mean, we're not going to talk about what happens in the books to not be too spoilery, but I wonder if the show will change much significantly, if they're going to be looking more at Edward's conquest of the Danelaw, which starts after Tettenhall, because Edward goes on the offensive into the Danelaw in sort of 912. That's the start of his first campaign, and then later again in 916 he pushes on and starts capturing all these towns and building these boor. But I wonder if we're going to see that.
I think it would make sense if they had a focus on Edward, because in the previous seasons they have built him up as like the successor to Alfred and stuff. So I think it would make sense if we had more of a focus on his conquests and stuff, while linking that to Uhtred's own personal stories, perhaps.
I think that makes sense. Like in the trailer, you can see Edward with a swanky new long haircut because his dad's not around anymore, so he does what he wants. So I think you might be right. Yeah, which to be fair is long overdue, because Edward he gets lost in the image of Alfred, but actually Edward's really interesting as well. And this is the point where I just want to say that this video is sponsored by Edward the Elder, the Forgotten... It's not actually, but I would highly recommend the book. It came out last year. The author is Michael John Key, and it's all about Edward the Elder. And it's a really interesting read, because he is not as well known as Alfred. He's not as well known as his successor Athelstan, but arguably he's just as important as both in a lot of different ways. So another thing that we wanted to sort of touch on is the portrayal of the Danes in the actual TV show, and how they interact with the Anglo-Saxons, because it kind of shows the Danes as being these huge guys who just kind of go around and they treat everyone really, really badly, and they burn everything, and they're pagans and they hate Christians. But actually the evidence on the ground is quite a bit different to this.
Yeah, I hope we get to see a potentially different side to the Danes, maybe in this next series, as we see like Edward going to East Anglia, well, there was settlement, maybe seeing more of their activities rather than just these big burly sword wielding guys.
I think that'd be quite nice, because there's a lot of evidence that points to a lot of integration, especially in your area, James, in Yorkshire, with all the Scandinavian place names and such.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd like to see that.
We had a little bit of that in the first series with Uhtred living up north, but apart from that, not much.
Yeah, no, that's right, because I guess a lot of potentially there were quite a few slaves that were taken that would kind of grow up in both worlds, and certainly for the descendants of the Danes, let's say the second generation immigrants that were born to let's say Danish fathers, and there's not that much evidence for Scandinavian women coming over, so a lot of them would have had English mothers, and there's a reason why we say it's my mother language, because we think that the mothers have a much more important role in the transmission of language to children. And so if there were lots of Danes having children with English women, it's very possible that their offspring would be either growing up bilingual, which is very possible, or potentially growing up speaking English and but also hearing Old Norse, and that's why we might get Old Norse words coming into Old English at this time. I think it'll be interesting if they looked at that a little bit in the show, the kind of difference in language, because they don't really play much with the language in the show, right?
No, not really. They just received pronunciation, I think, usually. But
Yeah, they have kind of the strange accents for the actors, though. They kind of like made up a kind of Scandinavian-esque accent for the Danish characters, and Uhtred has his own little accent, and all the Anglo-Saxons are RP, which is, you know, pretty inaccurate in itself. If you were going to make them have any accent, you might make them sound like they're from the Black Country or something. I don't know. Apparently, that's meant to be the most Anglo-Saxon that's retained the most, right? It's from the Black Country.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah. But no, that I think that would be quite an interesting one.
Imagine in the whole Last Kingdom, just in a Black Country accent. That sounds amazing.
It'll be low-key ridiculous. I mean, we both said that Uhtred should have been cast. Sean Bean should have been cast as Uhtred, and then just done it in his Yorkshire accent. Can you imagine? It would just be like, "My name's Uhtred, son of Uhtred. Destiny is all." I mean, I think it would have been great personally. Winter's coming. Oh, wrong show.
Yeah. Maybe when Uhtred gets older, you never know.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, if they need a young Uhtred, they'll just get Alexander Draymond to play young Uhtred, and then Sean Bean to step in as old Uhtred.
That sounds amazing.
I think we should have been hired to direct this. There would have been no rectangular shields, no toy shop helmets, and we would have made the correct choices for the actors.
We'll go to BBC and we'll pitch them this idea.
We will. I think it'll work. Who would you cast as? Okay, let me think. Guthrum.
That's he's the Jason Momoa.
Jason Momoa.
He gives me strong Guthrum vibes.
Strong Guthrum vibes. Can you imagine him with a bone in his hair? Because apparently that's a historical bit of evidence that he had a bone of his mother in his hair.
Oh yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, it's kind of whack.
I could see Jason Momoa rocking that look, to be fair. So
yeah. All right, I can't remember what else that we put on the docs list of topics, but I remember we had quite a few. We had some things about the Danelaw as well, I think.
Yeah, we had stuff about the Danelaw. We have stuff about Ethelred, who I think will be a big character this series.
About Ethelred?
Yeah, of Mercia.
Oh, yes, I was thinking Unready. I mean, do you know? I was like, wait, hold on a minute, not that one.
bit far ahead.
Yeah. What kind of role do you think he's gonna play, and how do you think that's kind of different to the information we have in a lot of the sources?
Well, in the previous series, he has appeared to have a tendency for pushing for Mercian independence and stuff, and somewhat being a thorn in Alfred's side. So it's interesting how that's going to develop, and also historically how subordinate Ethelred was to Wessex.
Yeah, I think the thing with the show is it shows Ethelred to be this terrible character, and it's a bit of a shame because actually from the historical documentation we get, like in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle and the life of Asa, and even just inferring from the events and the charters and things where Ethelred sees charters with Ethelfled, so his wife, and we read in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle that they were going on campaign together and things. It's more likely that they had a really good relationship and potentially were very happy in their marriage, and certainly politically worked to further together their own aims, rather than in the show where he's just this really mean character. But I guess that makes for a good story. Yeah,
I think it's all for the storylines and presenting Ethelfled as kind of an underdog, And
I guess that means as well, because they've presented Ethelfled as an underdog, that she can now kind of, for the purposes of her story arc, they can then really boost that in this season, because of course later on she becomes known as the Lady of the Mercians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more of her being, maybe, I don't know, shield maiden influences, like charging into battle, which is definitely not what happened historically.
Potentially.
Even though she was like this cool figurehead for Mercia, she would have still been in the back lines.
Right. Yeah, I think they probably will jump on the bandwagon just because of the whole Vikings thing with Lagertha, and I think Vikings really took it to an extreme, because there is some evidence for in the Norse culture. I mean, obviously you've got the Valkyria, you've got various ambiguous graves of female skeletons with weapons in context, but I think they really went it to the extreme of interpreting that evidence that is there for female fighters in Old Norse culture, and I think we simply don't have that evidence for Anglo-Saxon culture at all, especially in this time period, because they're Christian, and we know that Alfred's family was extremely pious.
Equating the strong, the leadership of Ethelflaed, and I guess bringing that influence in as well, because we do see in the trailer, she appears to be all bloodied with a sword in hand.
Yeah, and no shields.
It'll be cool to see her.
Which always really annoys me when they're charging into masses of men with no shield, and I'm like, it's just one stab. It's literally one stab. You've got nothing protecting you. Trust me, that leather isn't going to do anything. Especially when they've got another thing that really annoyed me, and I'm just going to have to say it now because otherwise it's going to be on my mind all night. And it is that in the trailer you see the image of this big Viking baddie, who actually, that's the next thing we need to talk about who this Viking character is, who's going to be the main opponent. But you see him in front of this big fire with kind of wearing the equivalent of a leather tank top. And I'm thinking, this is so ridiculous, because if there's going to be one area you're going to protect, it's going to be your arms. Because, if you're fighting with a shield, well, which he's not, but he should be, and a weapon, you're making strikes and things, it's just one slice of a sword and your arm's off. And it just always amazes me that they have like a tiny bit of leather sort of there on the arm, and then the rest is all kind of bare. And I mean, I know it looks cool, and I know he wants to flex his guns, but come on, like a little bit of accuracy would be much appreciated.
Yeah, charging into a shield wall with your arms exposed, just one spear, little poke under the arm.
It's one poke, and if you have no shield, it's a poke anywhere. Yeah. But hey ho, I mean, they're heroes in a show, so they're just gonna sort of charge through like the melting butter, like a hot knife or whatever.
Yeah, the classic plot armor.
Yeah, it's true. Having said that, I think the king, which we've talked rather a lot about, especially the speech, that portrayal of combat was really quite good. Was really gripping.
Yeah, it was very visceral, and I like that.
It would be nice to see a bit more of that in The Last Kingdom, because I do quite enjoy The Last Kingdom, but a lot of the fight scenes and the armor and the equipment they're using seems to be pretty off.
It's like quite theatrical, and I guess it's just the influences of shows like Vikings and Game of Thrones in a lesser extent, I guess, just overblowing it, which does make it it's fun to watch, but.
Yeah, but I think even if they made it more accurate, it wouldn't be less fun to watch. And I sometimes feel that it might be more fun to watch in a way, because if you ever watched sort of replays or whatever of our reenactment society and things, when things get heated, and if you added some blood and some theatrics, I think that would look really cool, like having a line and a shield wall, rather than rectangular shields and sort of going off and fighting one-on-one duels with each other. I think,
I think a historical portrayal of two shield walls clashing. I think that would look really good if they did it well.
Yeah, so, I think they did something like that in the first season, though, right? In the Battle of Eddington.
Things,
yeah. Except, again, the wrong shape of shield, but what can you do? They seem stuck with that. I saw them already in the trailer, and I was like, surely after 4 seasons, they will have changed the unpainted Roman shields, I should add, to an authentic Saxon shield, but apparently not.
Someone must have made that decision to use the square shields.
Like, what kind of maniac, what kind of psychopath would decide? And I'm sorry, I'm going to be blunt. Do you reckon they were like, we're going to piss off the historical accurate, nitwits like us so much that we're just going to give them rectangular shields?
They won't fall for this one. We'll give them rectangular shields. They won't accept this.
They'll never accept this. Like, we'll just show rectangular shield all the time. Toy shop helmets. We're going to save on budget so much. Yeah, maybe that was they've secretly scythed off millions just by not actually paying into the proper equipment. Yeah, I wouldn't put it past them.
The great rectangular shield conspiracy.
It's being exposed. Yeah, I mean, there's that, and that the Vikings were actually Catalan. This is the newest bit of information,
As well as William Shakespeare.
As well as William Shakespeare, yeah, that's right. William Shakespeare was actually a Viking Catalan. Yeah, not very well known information. How do you say to be or not to be in Old Norse?
You're testing me now.
No, it's chill. One question I do want to ask you though, which is to come back to what we were saying earlier, is who do you think the main Viking bad guy is going to be this series? The dude with the tank top. Who do you think that is?
The dude with the tank top.
Yeah.
Yeah, that it's interesting because as you were saying before, if the climax of the series might be the Battle of Tettenhall, which is quite a climactic one against the Northumbrians. So it could make sense to have a Northumbrian king,
right,
as the big bad. But then it depends who was actually involved in that battle and who that could potentially be.
I mean, I think Tettenhall. There's 3 kings that are named that are killed at Tettenhall on the Danish side, and it's Halfdene, Eohils, and is it Ingvar?
I think Ingvar.
Yeah. Which is kind of suspicious because 2 of those names are names of the initial kings, leaders of the Great Heathen Army. So Halfdan, who sometimes his epithet is of the wide embrace, but often he's called Halfdan Ragnarsson. And then you also have Ivar, like Ivar Beinlause, so Ivar the Boneless, his epithet. So it's kind of strange that you'd find those 2 names in this list of dead as well. It looks a little bit suspicious, also because we don't really hear about them much else. But there is in another book that I would recommend, the second sponsor of this video. Joke. Cut that out. It's The Vikings in England, Settlement, Society and Culture, which is written by Dawn Hadley. It's a little dense, but it's a very good summary of basically what we know about the Danelaw and inferences we can get from that. So in there, actually, she has a theory, or I think she might be quoting someone else, but it's basically that the kings that are killed there aren't actually Northumbrian kings, and that the Battle of Tettenhall isn't a fight against the Northumbrian Danes, but rather a fight against the Danes who were living in the northern and the eastern Midlands, so the area that was called the Five Boroughs. And we always, James, this is another little segue, but I always forget the 5th of the 5 boroughs. Do you reckon we can get the 5 boroughs live on camera?
I wonder if we... Yeah.
All right. The one I always forget is Nottingham.
Nottingham's the one we forget. Yeah.
Nottingham, Leicester, Lincoln, Derby, Stamford. We did it.
Nailed
it. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Nice.
We nailed it.
Okay.
We've got our degree.
We do. That's a first right there.
It is the first. It's the first time we've got them.
I mean, it is. It actually is as well. I remember many sleepless nights trying to remember the last of the 5 Danish boroughs.
I haven't been able to sleep for years.
I know. Finally, I'll be able to close my... Anyway, but those are the 5 boroughs. So these are the 5 key towns of an area that was called the 5 boroughs, which was an area of Danish settlement in the Midlands surrounding these towns. There's also a possibility that actually Cambridge was a lesser borough. Cambridge and Bedford, I think, are sometimes called lesser boroughs, that were essentially these kind of centres of power, kind of small towns we might think of where parts of the Danish army settled. And then later, when Edward the Elder went on the offensive, which is what we might be seeing this season, he would come to these places, these towns, besiege them, and then accept their surrender. So we read in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle that the army in Cambridge surrendered to Edward the Elder, or the army in Derby submitted to Ethelfled, which it actually didn't, because she had to break down the gates and attack. So actually, one of the things we might see is the attack on Derby, which was done by Ethelfled, if it does follow a bit more the course of the books. But again, I'll not spoil that too much. So yeah, it might be that this big Viking boy, the big bad guy, will be one of the kings, Halfdene or Ivar or Eohils that dies in Tettenhall, or it might already.
I think it makes sense because it seems like it's going to be a new character that they introduced, because we haven't seen this guy before,
right?
And I guess the impression we get from the sources is that these boroughs are quite fractured with their rulers and own army. So if they had to introduce a big bad, potentially who, is confronted at Tettenhall, then coming from one of these boroughs might make sense.
Yeah, I think that's potentially the road that they're going to go down, because I guess that's one thing that kind of a lot of people don't realize so much, is that with the reconquest, there I go again. I say reconquest. It's not a reconquest. It's an initial conquest, because the interesting thing about Edward the Elder is that he starts attacking places in what had been East Anglia and Western Mercia that had never been under West Saxon control before. So it's not a reconquest of areas that he and his forefathers had ruled before. This was a new conquest, and it was conquest at the expense of the Danes, who had conquered these areas at the expense of other Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. And I think that'll be interesting to see manifest in the show, and how they pick that up and try and wrangle with it as well, because they've really followed the line of Alfred, saying every other time, like, oh, the kingdom of England that I'm going to unify, and it's like, what kingdom? There was no kingdom. This is a new idea, and it probably wasn't yours, but it might have been Edward's. It's possible that Edward was thinking, look, let's take all of this. And maybe that's what we see with Ethelfled as well before she dies, which is in the 918, I think.
918 or 19, I think.
Yeah, it's around then, but just before she dies, she was trying to broker a peace settlement with the Danes in Northumbria, because they were getting yeeted by the Hiberno Norse, who were coming over with Ragnall. Which, he might be Ragnall. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it could be Ragnall, or do you think it's too early?
Yeah, that is potentially a bit late, because that would be like a gap of... Yeah, because it's like 919, isn't it? When the Hiberno Norse come over?
Yeah, and that's like, let me think, like 17 years.
Like, yeah, like, isn't it 30 years after Alfred dies?
Hold on, I'm not good at maths here. I mean,
let's
just say it's a long time. It's going to be a long...
It's quite... It's at least 10 years, maybe more.
Yeah, at least a decade, possibly more. Not a century, but... definitely more than a decade. So kind of imagine that kind of time frame. Yeah. I think you're probably right.
Might be a bit late, but it could be cool to see some Hiberno Norse influence coming. We follow Uhtred going up north, potentially. We'll see how his storyline develops. Yeah.
Because he's already in the show at this point. In the last season that he goes up north to Dunholm, which is Durham, and that he kills Kjartan and the Danes that are around there, and gets revenge on him. But he hasn't yet obviously got that final revenge that he wants, which is the revenge on his uncle in Bebbanburg. But there is a really interesting historical aspect to the storyline as well, which is that it's true that Bebbanburg and this northern area of Northumbria didn't fall to the Danes, that it continued on as some kind of independent polity at the same time.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how their vague independence is represented in the show, and how the relations between the Northumbrian Vikings and the Earls of Bebbanburg are presented.
Yeah, I think obviously in the show, which is based on the book interpretation, it's that the Earls of Bebbanburg of this part of Northumbria that was called Bernicia beforehand, that they worked with the Danes, and that's how they retained their independence. But actually, when Ragnall comes over, we do see them fighting the Danes. And because we have very little documentary evidence from Northern England at the time, which is a great shame, because what's happening in Northumbria is really murky. It's possible they were fighting the Danes as well, and I think there is some good evidence for that. But not only the Danes, also the Scots. The other great enemy of the Northumbrians, apart from Southerners, is always the Scottish. And it's no different then. And actually, this is an era when Scotland was expanding, so it had unified in the previous century, and at this point it was starting to expand southwards. And it's at this time that Edinburgh, which is partially of a Northumbrian etymology, the Burg, again we've already talked about this word Burg, is found in Edinburgh. This is the time when the Scots move south, they capture Edinburgh, they start pushing into the borders. So it's very likely that the Earls of Bebbanburg were at this time fighting the Scots on the northern frontier, potentially the Danes to the south, and the Norwegians to the west, because we also have Norwegians who were in Ireland and Scotland pushing into western England at this time.
Cumbria.
But into Cumbria,
Yeah, definitely. Lots of room, maybe in later series, but with the relations between Bebbanburg and everything.
Yeah, I feel like they probably won't look into this too much because I think the show dumbs things down quite a lot. And they kind of have Danes, they have Saxons, and not very much in between, which is understandable enough because, of course, if you start introducing all this Hiberno Norse and Earls of Bamborough and Scots,
it'll get a bit bloated.
Probably, yeah. And I think for a lot of people, they don't really care that much about the history. It's more about the action, which is fine because it's an action show. Like I understand that, but as history nerds, we would absolutely love if they would delve into this a little bit. So BBC producers, give us a call. We have great ideas for how to expand this out. Season 10 of The Last Kingdom, the
Last Kingdom cinematic universe,
the Strathclyde expansion, the DLC.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah. No, I think that would be interesting if they did. Oh, all right. What else have we got on our list of things to talk about?
We've covered quite a lot of it, to be fair. Archbishops of York, their whole rolling thing.
Yeah, because they do show in the trailer they have their set of York, with the minster. So I think that they will be returning to York. They have like a battering ram ramming down the gate of York. So I'm not sure who's doing the battering, but I'm hoping it's not going to be the Danes, because there's actually quite good evidence that the Danes who came to York were pretty good pals with the archbishops of York, which isn't what you'd expect, because obviously the Danes coming over were heathen, they were pagans, they were conquerors, and the archbishops of York were, well, obviously Christian. It's kind of in the title. But actually, they seem to have got on really well, and the coinage we find in York seems to be minted by the archbishops of York. One of the issues is called the St. Peter's coinage, but at the same time, we find really pagan symbols on there. So
the mixing of the motifs.
Yeah. What do you think that kind of says about the relationship between them in York at the time?
It definitely. Well, it doesn't point to them to being like separate or like hostile to each other. Level of cooperation and maybe just coexistence, perhaps. I guess it links to the further trends of cultural assimilation, where you have the Danish settlers coming over, marrying English wives, and mingling with English priests and whatever.
Mingling with English priests.
Mingling with the priests, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think a lot of the coins that we find, a lot of the symbols are kind of people jump on the bandwagon and say, yes, these are clearly pagan symbols, like a raven or a sword or a triquetra, and others. But recently, some scholars have argued that these are actually quite ambiguous symbols. That the sword could be St. Gabriel's sword, right? Is it Gabriel that has a sword, or is it Michael?
I'm not sure. I'm not on my Christian.
Yeah, okay. Well, Christians in the chat, let us know which angel it was. And some have interpreted the raven to be like one of the doves of Noah or something that he threw out, which I think is a bit far. Like, I'm pretty sure it's going to be a Norse raven.
That's maybe a stretch.
Yeah, it's potentially a stretch, but it's interesting, though, that they might have been producing coins with motifs that would appeal to both the new incoming pagans and the pre-existing Christians, which does again suggest there is some kind of balance that's being struck.
Yeah, the power of the church might have appealed to the Vikings, because they seen the political significance that the archbishops had, and their role in government and stuff, and they may have understood that that's the way to control a population, rather than removing that establishment, working with it, and to bring further control potentially. Yeah,
I think it's quite a different image to that which is portrayed in The Last Kingdom in a lot of ways. That it's more kind of they're coming in and they're taking over control at the top end, but actually in terms of let's say societal organization and things, we don't find much evidence that they completely changed it. Actually, it seems they adapted some of the systems, so like the wapentakers, I said that in a really weird Geordie way, the wapentakes as they're called, which are literally means weapon takes, or vapnatakur, I think in Old Norse. Yeah, and the hundred system is a West Saxon system that's later imposed on as the Edward the Elder and others move northwards in their conquests. But it seems like they kind of changed things at the top end of society, but then left the rest to their own devices in a lot of ways.
Hmm. Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. Was there anything else that we were meant to talk about, or it might be quite interesting if people have any questions that they want to ask about this, that we can pick up on some questions and talk about some topics there. I will come back after spoilers. I mean, none of this should be particularly spoilery because we're not talking about what happens in the books and the series with the characters, but rather about the kind of broad history behind it. But I hope none of it has been too spoilery, apart from that they all die. But I mean, these were characters that were around in the late 9th century. Of course they're all
that
dead.
Shouldn't be a spoiler.
That shouldn't be a spoiler, and if it is, you need to look long and hard in the mirror.
Isn't alive anymore.
Yeah. Face your own mortality.
No, they got very deep very fast.
Yeah, let's take it back a tone maybe. Okay, I think I can see. I think there's been a massive lag in the video, so I can't see any of the live comments. But once it's back, I'll answer some comments quickly.
I guess we could mention the community of St. Cuthbert as well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they could be portrayed in the show.
I mean, they might be. They portrayed them in season 2. They're kind of the pretty, what was it called? Bishop Eadred, I think is his name. That's a real character in the story of Guthrud, who is the Viking slave, or the Scandinavian slave that is freed, and because of this whole vision of St. Cuthbert, and then he comes and leads an army in the north. And this does seem to have happened. We find this in the Historia de Sancto Cuthberto, which is the history of St. Cuthbert, this text that is written. And so they showed it in season 2, which is interesting, but I'm not sure if they'll make a reappearance. I think they're just going to drop the Guthrud line. I'm not actually sure what does happen with Guthrud historically.
I don't. Yeah, I feel like we don't know. I feel like the records just drop out.
Yeah, I think there's a massive lag because I've just seen the viewership spike and then Jakob say "yep, lag." And it's still sort of frozen on there, so I might hang fire it until it jumps back. Let's see, let's just make sure I've not lost connection. No, I've still got connection there. That's still on there. Oh, it's been really slow, isn't it? Hopefully it picks up. It's on the same spot, yeah. Maybe it's just kind of died.
It might have just died.
And we were just getting on to the questions and answers.
And yeah.
Very sad times. Well, this has definitely been a learning curve. I feel like YouTube, like, why have they made it this way? Oh, is it back? It might be back. Oh no, it's buffering again. Amazing.
It buffered and you kind of stuck.
Oh, there's another stutter. It's gonna buffer again in a second, I think. But hopefully that means we're back.
Might be catching it.
Yeah. Yeah, potentially. Well, it's definitely been a learning curve doing this live stream. I didn't realize that YouTube had made it so ridiculously difficult to host a conversation.
It is, yeah. It shouldn't be that hard, just two people talking.
Yeah, I mean, I know I'm a boomer, but this used to be simple. Like, I used to do this kind of thing a fair amount on the channel. You know, you just open up Google Hangouts, you'd call them, you'd start a live stream, and that would be that. Oh, I think we're getting back. I can see the viewership increasing again.
Back. Yeah,
I can see you guys again. Okay. Good stuff. If you have any questions about the show, about the history, about anything we've talked about, then just type it out and we'll be happy to talk about that. Are you happy to do 20 minutes of questions, if there's that long at least?
Mm-hmm. Of course. Yeah.
There was a lag, but it's fine now. Okay, cool. It's fixed.
Apparently, Guthrud just died.
He just dies.
895.
Oh, Okay. I mean, he's already dead at this point then.
Guthred was
In the
buried at
series.
York Minster. Nice.
Hey, some boy.
He just died.
He just died. Let me have a look. I've got the third sponsor of this video is the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles that we've got. But to be fair, like, to view the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles as a historical source, basically they are just sponsored by Alfred the Great and Asser's biography of Alfred as well. So whenever you're reading it and you read anything about Alfred, just think, why is this telling me that Alfred did this amazing thing? Because it's sponsored by Alfred the Great. That's why. Quite literally as well. Now, I think I lost James at this point. Oh. Yes, I think you're back.
Hello, I'm
Hello. I think you're back now.
the whole shebang.
Yes, everything.
Perfect.
Okay, I've not had any questions in the chat yet, though. I'm not sure if the chat's entirely caught up or not.
Maybe they might still be coming back.
Here is a point. Ivar is already dead. Yeah, so that's Ivar the Boneless. So it's that Ivar. Do they show Ivar the Boneless in Vikings at all? Not Vikings, Last Kingdom.
In the last. Excuse me. What show is that? yeah. He dies in series 1, and they do show him. I think.
Does he? Is that Ivar though, or Ubba?
Oh wait, no, I don't think they.
Yeah, because it's Ubba that's killed, because he dies at Kernwit with the axe. They have the cool duel. Also, Ubba is very interesting because of his epithet, which is the Dux Frisicorum or Dux Frisonum, which is the Duke of the Frisians. But I'm not getting down that tangent today because I wrote a whole dissertation on that. So I'm leaving that there. But I don't think they ever show Ivar, do they?
I don't think so. I think he's like he focuses on Ireland, doesn't he?
Yeah, he yeets off to Ireland. And then he dies in Ireland, I think, right?
I think so.
But then this Ivar that we come across at the Battle of Tettenhall is a different guy. But it's just suspicious that there's an Ivar and a Halfdan when there was an Ivar and a Halfdan who are both dead at this point, who were in the initial Great Heathen Army as well.
Yeah, some copying's going on, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so Justin asks, in this next season, what do you think will happen regarding the prophecy the dead Dane told Uhtred about being a king? What do you think? Is that going to come up again?
Well, I guess it depends where he would be king. Would he be king in Mercia, Wessex, Northumbria?
Right.
I guess it's all up in the air.
It is all up in the air. I think they used that device in the was it the second or the third season? I can't remember now. But I think that they just kind of told him that to get him on side rather than that it was actually true. Although it was very cool with the kind of with the dead Dane and then the harp string and stuff, and he like pulls out of the ground and he spits the harp string out. It was pretty cool. Yeah, I like that a lot.
That was a cool scene.
We have another question.
I'll send you my bank account details.
I'll send you an invoice. Jakob and Justin say it froze again. Okay, I'll wait a little second then. Thank you very much, Bradley. Is it type yes if you're still hearing us and still watching us and it's still fine? If no, type F.
F's in the chat.
Oh wow, this is spoiler crazy. Is it?
Is it spoiler?
Is it? The Normans. Oh yeah, sorry, the Normans invaded England in 1066. Spoiler.
I don't know if you heard, but yeah, they came over, guys. It's all over.
It's all over. It's gone. It's dead.
All the Anglo-Saxons are dead.
No. Sad times.
I think it's all over. It is now.
It is now. Oh man. Ooh. Okay, I think the chat lagged again, so I'll just wait until it gets back. Oh, and James is gone. No, come back. Hey, he's back. Just like the resurgent Anglo-Saxon England back again.
Once more.
Okay, someone turn your bass up has a really whack theory, which is, was Uhtred, son of Uhtred, secretly a Frisian? That will probably be the big reveal of the season. Did you know that even Julius Caesar had Frisian blood? Wow.
Now this guy knows what's what.
He does. Just FBI, open up. The Frisian Bureau of Intelligence. They want him on site.
Frisian Bureau of Intelligence. Nice. This goes right to the top.
This goes right to the top. Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
It's Uhtred.
It's Uhtred. Yeah, well, you never know. Well, there was, as you know, Hilbert, Frisian influence in the Great Heathen Army. So,
well, yes, I can actually tell you about that in precisely 11,001 words. I can tell you all about that.
Wow, very succinct.
Oh yes,
just do a read through of it.
Yeah, a dramatic reading. With Trevor Reeve, Friday at 9 on BBC One.
The world premiere of your dissertation.
Of my ASMR dissertation being read. Yes. Okay, apparently it's back. So let's take up another question. Let me see. Any more questions? So save the talking so we can hear it. Okay, I guess it died. This is spoiler heavy. Was Uhtred a Frisian? I mean, that would be the huge reveal. Aha. How Germanic are the English? Sure, there's no big nation that's never been mixed, but should the English regard themselves as a Germanic people that differs from their Celtic or British neighbours? I guess it depends on your metric, on how you want to determine that, because Germanic is a language group ultimately, and English is a Germanic language. So in that way, yeah, you can. It doesn't have much Celtic influence. If you want to go down the genetics route, then
that's a tricky one.
I mean, it is a tricky one because it depends on the study you look at. And also, we're kind of still at an early stage of doing proper testing on loads of people because it's still a very imperfect system at the moment when we're looking at DNA results. And what the DNA does suggest is that there is an awful lot of the admixture that we relate to British groups, to indigenous groups, to Celtic groups. And I put Celtic in quotation marks because the same study found that actually Celtic people from Scotland, Ireland, Wales did not have similar DNA. So there's not a Celtic gene in that sense. So it does depend on what you mean by Germanic in that sense. Do you mean culturally? I mean, the culture has changed an awful lot since the period of the Anglo-Saxon times. So does that even mean we're Germanic? Were they particularly Germanic or not?
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, when in the initial migrations, were they like Germanic more then? Did that get lessened over the years?
With Christianization, for example, is being Germanic being pagan? Is it having that traditional belief, or does the religious belief not change? Is it just the culture, but Christianization changes the culture? It's a very complex question to unpack.
Yeah, it's quite the biggie. Needed at least another dissertation.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, there's several dissertations worth of that, I think, in there. Yeah. Let's see. What is the riddle of steel? Do you know what the riddle of steel is, James?
The what? Sorry.
The riddle of steel.
Oh, I can't say I've heard of that.
Neither have I. Could you clarify that a little bit? In the meantime, Sheruto asks, "Did you read the book?" Yes, we've read the books. I think you're ahead by 1 or 2 books. I still need to read the last one.
The most recent one.
Yeah. So with that in mind, we've specifically talked about things that that are not spoilery related to what happens in the books, and that's the most that we can avoid spoilers by just talking about the broader context and history and opinions and things. Okay.
Even though the TV show does differ from the books quite a lot, but it does. Avoided it.
It does. We've done our best to avoid it as much as we can. So the Saxons had round shields in the Last Kingdom. The Kents and of course the Mercians and the last battle in season 2, where the few had round shields. Yeah, so they seem to show the Mercians with round shields and the West Saxons with rectangular shields. But it's not accurate.
Yeah, the Mercians look really cool in that.
They look really cool.
Like
Old Helm. They look more accurate than the West Saxons. The West Saxons kind of look like rip-off Romans in a lot of ways. Yeah. but it's like old helm. They have like this kind of like blue mantle, and then they have like chainmail and the round shield and the helmets, and they look really cool.
That's super cool.
Yeah, a lot more accurate than the West Saxons, and the Danes are pretty awful in terms of accuracy. From what I can tell, huge bits of fur, the toy shop helmets, the ridiculously large unwieldy axes. Oh, and this is another thing I meant to talk about: the uses of horses in combat. Now, in the trailer, like I thought I was watching some kind of film featuring Native Americans or something. The way that they were charging into battle on horses. What's going on? You can see them on horses with their round shield, just like that. It's no, wrong, absolutely not.
Cries and kite shield.
Cries and kite shield, because that's one of the big things that the kite shield is for, is to protect the leg of the rider as well as the body, and protect the arm when you're going in for a swing and things. But a round shield is not a shield that's designed to be used on horseback. Yeah, and we have no evidence that they ever fought on horseback. What we do have evidence for, however, and there's a lot of this in the Battle of Malden as well. In fact, let's get him out. Let's bring him up on the show. Pull that up, Jamie.
Flying in from Malden, it's Byrhtnoth.
It's Byrhtnoth. That's actually, this is another theory of mine, that the Battle of Malden, it features the Ealdorman Byrhtnoth, and he is unfortunately killed, but we've lost the last few lines of the Battle of Malden, and I would absolutely love it if those last few lines are, "Oh, and what's this? It's Byrhtnoth with a steel chair," and that would be great, but unfortunately didn't happen.
We can believe that. No one can prove us wrong.
It's true, but anyway, to get back to the horse point, which is we're probably going to be seeing a huge, ridiculous battle with horses in the Last Kingdom, and me saying that that's wrong. What evidence we do have for horses, and I'll read a bit in Old English, is Broken wurde het the hisa Juana horse forletan, feir a fisan and forth gangan. And what that means is he ordered then that each young warrior should leave his horse and drive it far away. So Last Kingdom producers, they ride on horses to the battle, and then they forletan, which means they drive them far away. So they were travelling to battlefields on horseback, and we know the Danes did this as well. They arrived in East Anglia in 865, got horses from the East Anglian ruler, and then rode north to Northumbria, which is where the show starts. But they didn't fight on horseback. They dismounted, and then they fought on foot, and that's where the whole formation with the shield wall that works on foot, because you're standing. It doesn't work on horseback. So we're probably going to be screeching at the TV screens when we see that, James.
That
yeah. Anyway, bit of a divergence there, but always good to whack up the old. This is the next sponsor of the video. It's Richard Hamer. He's not. It's not. But this is a great book. I would really recommend it. I've read from it in a few vlogs that I'm going to be posting, and it's called The Choice of Anglo-Saxon Verse by Richard Hamer. I think you can pick it up for about $10 on Amazon, but it's a lovely little book, and it's full of basically your staple Old English poetry. So I would highly recommend it, with a facing translation of modern English as well. All right, let's take a look. Are there any questions that are jumping out at you, James?
What about second breakfast?
What about second breakfast? Well, we've already had one.
Question mark. It has an exclamation mark at the end.
It's a statement. What about the second breakfast?
Where he's demanding it. We've missed it again.
It's a quote from Conan. So I'm not that much of a boomer. I might not know how my technology works, but I don't get the 80s film reference. So it's a special breed of boomer. Yeah. What about second breakfast? I haven't seen a single episode of The Last Kingdom. Do I like scrambled eggs? Yeah, they're not too bad. Bit of salt, bit of pepper. Now, James, we have a different method of making scrambled eggs. Like, you beat them and put them in a separate little, container, and then you put them in the pan. Whereas I kind of do it all in the pan. I like slosh the milk in, bit of butter, to get it going, get them all being friendly in the pan, and then yeet the eggs in and kind of mix them. But yeah.
Yeah, you always usually need less washing up after, because you just do it in the pan. But I like separating it out, and then you slosh it in the pan.
Yeah. I guess it has its own merits, because that way you can take the eggshells and bits out if you mess it up in that way.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Okay,
which
we
I do
have.
quite often.
So do I. I just end up eating them because I can't be bothered. But sure. So we have another related question. Well, not even a related question, but a related statement, which is that I think they overdid it with the Shield Maidens. And I think we talked about this a little bit earlier in Vikings, but I think that in Vikings they really tried to amp up the kind of warrior girl phenomenon, which isn't really supported. It's more understandable for the Vikings because there is more of a context for that within the Norse culture. You have the Valkyria, the weapon graves. But what's your take on that, James? Do you think Vikings takes it a bit far with that? Do you think it's an interpretation that could be accurate?
It's I can get behind it a bit more with the Vikings, like you say, because it has a bit basis in mythology and stuff. Even though historically, maybe you wouldn't see it that often, but it was a fairly integral part of their culture. But in terms of Anglo-Saxons, I'm not sure how far they can take that. But obviously, it would still be cool. But just historically, with Ethelflaed especially, would it be cooler to see her more behind the scenes, but still being strong and powerful?
I think that's one thing, is that a certain strand of society today thinks that kind of being powerful or wielding power has to be in the kind of way of fighting, and that's the only way that women could be powerful, is to show them as being warriors. But actually I think that's quite far from the truth. I think there were incredibly powerful women back then, like Ethelflaed, for example. In Emma of Normandy later. I think Alfred's wife, although she's a little bit behind the scenes, by looking at her appearances in the charters of her son, for example, and the hardships she endured, was probably a force to be reckoned with as well. I mean, she's a bit schneidi in The Last Kingdom, though, right? It's Aelswith, the Mercian. Yes. She's a little bit schneidi, but probably in actuality she was a force to be reckoned with. She manoeuvred to get her son onto the throne and to keep Ethelwald away from her son and from gaining that royal power. So I think there's an awful amount to be said, and I think Game of Thrones does that really well, which is to portray women as being able to manipulate and move things from behind the scenes without particularly being warriors. And I think that's kind of the approach that I would like to see them do with Ethelflaed. So have Ethelflaed potentially being more of a commander type figure like Cersei Lannister, minus the incest. I will say that.
And the elephants.
And the elephants. I wonder how they would have reacted to elephants on an Anglo-Saxon battlefield.
I probably just very badly. They would have.
What's the Old English word for elephant? Because the Old English word for camel is olfend, but I think that's related to the Old English word for elephant, because it's like elephant, olfend.
Yeah,
I feel like it might be.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Get out Bruce and Fred.
Do you want to pull out Bruce and Fred? I'll talk about the next question.
Next sponsor is
the next sponsor. I mean, I would love that. Jakob asks, in the trailer they show ship scenes, so are we going to get some more ship battles? Now, the time for ship battles, unfortunately, I think is over at this point. We do get really interesting information in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle about ship battles, and that Alfred that he builds ships that are neither of the Frisian design nor of the Danish. And it describes these ships as being sort of more like troop carriers, with some being as large as 60 oars. So it's a different kind of ship, and they actually used Frisians to man these ships, and we get a whole list of an attack that happened in the River Stour, so that's in East Anglia, of the Anglo-Saxons and the Frisians going out and fighting the Danes at sea. But unfortunately, that happens in 896, and at this point in the show, we're already in, season 3 ends Battle of the Holm. That's 902. So I think if we were going to see ship stuff, it should have happened already. But maybe they're going to jumble the order around. That's a possibility.
I think they had a bit of ship stuff, at least in the books, in the early books. There is mention of the ships of Alfred and how kind of bad they are, but.
Yeah, in the books they have a whole section with it, right? Like Uhtred is one of the captains, and like they sail out and stuff. Yeah. But in the show, we haven't seen anything in that aspect yet. All right, I can see another question. Oh, so James, I'm gonna let you answer this one. How is the C in Wulfrich or Wulfric or Leofric pronounced?
It's Wulfrich, isn't it? The ch.
Yeah, so I think it might depend on dialect and period. I think in the early Anglo-Saxon period it would be a k, but that this palatalizes, so the palatalization process leads to the k being a ch sound. So in this time period, I think already it would be Wulfrich and Leofrich.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think they do sometimes say Old English place names, and I think they do mess up the pronunciations a fair amount.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it's cool to see especially in like the title cards where they have the Old English names and then they change into the modern ones. That is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, I do really like that. That's a really cool feature, because then you kind of see how these place names sort of contract to become modern place names a lot of the time.
You can see the development.
Yeah. Okay, have you ever considered doing an episode in which you edit Viking-style flags? I haven't, to be honest. In terms of Viking flags, there is an interesting flag which is Uber's flag that's written about. I think it's only written about a fair bit later in sort of the 12th, 13th century, and I'm not sure exactly which source it is, but they write that Uber has a raven flag. So kind of the flag with the ravens, often called the Norse raven, was his flag, and there's this whole story attached to it that when they would be victorious, that the raven would be flying out, but when they were going to be defeated in battle, it would sort of limp, like the raven would kind of sit like this on the flag. It's a fantastic story, but yeah, so that's one Viking flag. I think the Dittenbru, so like the Danish flag, that one is from the 11th century or 12th century.
Later, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's later than the Viking Age. So yeah, I don't think we have any particularly other flags or banners. Do any spring to mind for you that we could use at this point for the Vikings?
Not really, because like flags as a concept they're more modern, I think.
Yeah.
Banners were more common.
Mm.
But yeah, none specifically. Because I feel like it's not really something they would mention in too much detail.
Yeah, that's true.
Mythology related ones, but yeah.
I'm not sure if there's any kind of mention of flags or banners in some of the battle poetry in the Battle of Malden or Brunanburh. I can't remember coming across anything like that.
No, me neither.
Yeah, so yeah, I might have to look into that, because I haven't looked at that, but I can't remember from having read them. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing springs to mind.
Okay, let's see what else. Right, so this question: to what extent were Old English and Old Norse mutually intelligible? Was it possible to have a meaningful conversation? I have just today recorded a video answering that question.
Perfect. Well, just have to wait.
But in that case, I'm going to throw this one to you, James, because I want to hear your take on it and whether my take is similar to yours.
Oh, no. Okay. Well, I feel like grammatically they're fairly similar, because in terms of strong and weak verbs and that kind of stuff, like the fundamental grammar of Old English and Old Norse, they're fairly similar, because they come from the Germanic roots and stuff, where they have past participles or what. Yeah, they're similar style. But in terms of vocabulary, there's quite noticeable differences. But there would definitely be a degree of intelligibility there. Like they would pick out a few words, but I don't know, pronunciation as well. There's some different sounds in Old Norse that Old English speakers probably wouldn't have encountered, probably. So there'd definitely be some degree, but not masses. I don't know. That's my take.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good take, but I think it's a really broad question, because Old English is spoken from sort of the 5th century when the Anglo-Saxons come over up until, well, arguably into the 12th century. So that's a huge period of time, and it changes.
Depends what Old English we're talking about.
Exactly,
yeah.
And like where as well. So a Northumbrian dialect of Old English had more features that were similar to North Germanic features, to features found in Old Norse already before contact with the Scandinavians. Whereas our kind of standard Old English is actually late 10th century West Saxon stuff, so from Wessex, and our standard Old Norse is mid 13th century from Iceland, so Old West Norse based, influenced, rather than Old East Norse, which is what the Danes were speaking. And clearly the Old West Norse influenced Old Icelandic from the mid 13th century is going to be quite different to the Old East Norse 9th century Old Danish that was spoken when they were coming and interacting with the Old English, and it would be more different rather than less so. So I think the language that the Vikings were speaking when they came to England with the Great Heathen Army, the time of the show, would be more similar to the English of the time than this standard, let's call it, Old Norse, which you probably learn, and indeed which we learned, and you still learn in university at the moment, which is based on the saga writings.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so I believe that second generation English Danes were bilingual to the extent that communication was not a problem, just like Normandy with the Franks. I mean, again, I guess it would depend. I think there is a certain case to be made for bilingualism, but if the languages were mutually intelligible, it doesn't make sense to be bilingual, particularly because then you can speak one language and be understood by the other. So you could really just speak your own language, and then the other person can understand. But at the same time, I think bilingualism is still a solid possibility, and there is evidence for that in let me get this right. Is it in Ethel? I think it's Ethelwerd's Chronicle, which is a 10th century Latin version of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. He writes that the body of Ealdorman Ethelwulf in 871 is taken to Northworthy, which is not a place name that we would recognize today. But he adds afterwards, but it is called in the Danish tongue Derby. So, well, we all know Derby. It's the Norse place name stuck, but the fact that he knew the Danish name and thought to include it and said, which is known, so it's today known, in the late 10th century, suggests there was a Danish-speaking population within England in the late 10th century still. So it does indeed suggest bilingualism.
To want to include it.
Exactly. Exactly. So that would be very interesting, but unfortunately, if it was a spoken language, which it probably was, rather than being written down, then we probably don't know too much about it, because if it's not being written down, we have no way of knowing really. Well, there's a few ways like place names and things like this, but apart from that, we don't really have a particularly good way of knowing. All right, shall we do 3 or 4 more questions, and then shall we call it a night?
Sounds good.
Yeah. James, have you played Age of Empires before?
I have, yeah. I'm a big fan of Age of Empires.
Same here.
Classic.
I think that was the first video game I properly played, Age of Empires 2.
Yeah.
It's a classic game. The Old English in that was hilarious, if I recall.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Because you play as the Britons, and then they're speaking some kind of terrible Old English.
Yeah, the names for the people in the game, like the Teutons, yeah, all kinds of mixed matched, but
very whack.
I think there's a 4th one coming out. Like,
is there?
Got revealed.
I saw something about that, because Age of Empires 3 kind of just like ripped the community apart. Some people really liked it.
That was
yeah. What's your take on Age of Empires 3?
I don't know. I think it was like focused around the New World, like solely. I think, and I don't know.
Yeah.
It's an interesting area. I don't know, but I just preferred the variety of cultures they had in Age of Empires 2.
Yeah, that's true. I did actually really enjoy Age of Empires 3, but that's because I was quite big on Native Americans and the war paths, or is it war chiefs or something that came out. I really enjoyed playing that, because you could play as different Native American factions there. Like, I think you could play as, was it the Aztecs, the Lakota, and the Iroquois, I think you could play as, but they were pretty cool. Yeah,
definitely. If you're big into Native American stuff, I can imagine it being really good.
That was cool, and you got to play as the Dutch, so I got to go around and like make a nice colony and everything. It was brilliant.
Now we found the real reason.
Just missing the Frisian DLC. That would be great. But, yeah. Okay, so speaking of Frisian, why does Frisian resemble Dutch more than English, despite them being genetically closer to the latter? So this is because of contact between the two languages, and also that just because a language is in a language group with another language doesn't necessarily make it more similar to other languages in that language group, which is it's kind of a bit hard to get your head around when it's explained like that. But if you think that, for example, let's use the Old Norse example, that if they were mutually intelligible, well, Old English and Old Norse are not in the same branch of the Germanic language family. One is in the North Germanic branch, another is in the West Germanic branch. And in a similar way, while Frisian is yes, it's in the Anglo-Frisian branch of the West Germanic tree, Dutch is in the Low Franconian branch of the West Germanic tree. So you can see that even though they're in different groups, they can still be fairly similar in certain ways. And this is because of long periods of contact. So Frisian speakers have been rubbing up against Dutch speakers for about, let's say, 800 years. So then you do get significant borrowing and influence of the one language on the other, and vice versa, depending on the relationship and the status that the languages have. So that's why they are more similar at this point to English and Frisian. And also remember, English has had an awful lot of influence on it. It's had Norse influence, it's had French influence, it's had Latin influences, it's had sound changes, it's had everything. And Frisian has had that on the other hand. So that's how these languages can, even though they were similar at one point, they can drift apart because of a different history.
Yeah, it's all about the historical changes.
It is, those sound changes. All right, so Turn Your Base Up asks, what do you think of the fighting in the Last Kingdom and Vikings? Often you see shield bashing in a shield wall or a lot of 1v1 fights on the battlefield. Is this historically accurate? No. Basically not. It's 1v1 fighting is the way to get killed, because if you decide to go and duel someone, on a battlefield, historically, teamwork is what got you through. And so you wouldn't be on your own, because if you're on your own, you're exposed. Especially with this system, it's a round shield. Now, a round shield's pretty great when you're in a line of other round shields. You're being protected by your buddy to your left, you're protected by your buddy to the right, and you can deal with opponents together. But if you're on your own, you simply don't have that protection, and you're pretty useless on your own, actually. So I think, yeah, it's not particularly accurate, the kind of duel. The shield wall scenes are cool. I'm not sure how accurate the kind of having the front row crouching down and then the next row kind of being higher. I don't think that's accurate. What do you think?
Mobility, probably too much. But
yeah.
But yeah, obviously the one-on-one duels make for a better show. So
I guess.
But shield walls are super cool though.
Having said that though, what I think I should clarify the point, because there were sort of champion fights, let's say. So there were fights when it would be a man-to-man combat, a duel. There's the word in Old Norse, it's the holmganger for this. We know that this occurred, so it did occur from time to time, but kind of what I was more referring to was that in a lot of the time in a battlefield, you have everyone kind of pairing off with a partner and then fighting their partner and on the other side, and it's like, no, that didn't happen.
Not at all, yeah.
Oh, thank you very much for the donation there, DL Southwell. I'm glad you enjoyed the stream. All right. Oh, yes, nice to see other people have played Age of Empires as well. What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? Well, I guess that depends. Is it an African or a European swallow?
That is the question.
That is the question. Yeah. Just watch. User has left the chat. Finally, a good question. I read about Anglo-Saxons, Danes and Norse having tattoos. Why do we know about tattoos from the time period? Is it true Harold Godwinson was recognised for his? Well, to answer quickly, why do we not know much about tattoos? Because when we dig up a body, we don't have the skin anymore, so we just have the bones.
Unless it's a bog body.
Unless it's a bog body, which unfortunately they're not really doing in this period anymore. It's more a kind of an earlier stage. But in terms of tattoos... have you read much about tattoos from the period, James?
Not really. I don't think I've come across anything really.
Yeah.
But we do hear about, obviously we hear about their grooming and stuff, and they're well groomed, but it's not really something they would, and it's more so in passing in various sagas or whatever, just to set a scene or whatever. They wouldn't really focus on it too much. I haven't heard much, if anything, about tattoos, though. That's an interesting question.
Yeah, I can't think of any particular source of information on tattoos, although there is something in my mind that's going, there is some mention of tattoos somewhere, and I'm sure that there was some kind of tattooing going on, because as you mentioned, James, the Vikings, the Scandinavians at the time were very appearance conscious, and you find this in Viking graves. And actually, I don't have it here with me, but I have a lovely little bone comb, and we find lots of combs made of well, that's what our archaeology supervisor James Barrett, he's always banging on about, the reindeer combs and the reindeer up in the Norwegian mountains and things. But there was a huge trade of reindeer bone, reindeer antler combs that are found and that are made because they were really conscious of their appearance. We have these little implements that we find in gravesites as well for picking lice and for pulling hairs and things like this. So the story actually in a lot of I can't remember. I think that it's Alcuin's letter. So that's sort of late 8th century, early 9th century. Alcuin complains that English women were going off with Danish men because, well, quite possibly the Danish men were simply a lot better groomed. They were bathing, they were grooming, they were careful of their appearance, and even in is it Norwegian today that Saturday is a Laugardagar, or that's the Old Norse, and that's kind of its bath day.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
So it's possible that also they would have engaged in some kind of tattooing. We know they did teeth filing. So they in some of the skulls that we found, the teeth, they were filed so that they were sort of straight. I think they actually tried to show that with is it Skorpa of the White Horse in the first season? I think I seem to remember his teeth are kind of filed, and I loved that because I was like, that's them using archaeological evidence. Yeah. No, that was really cool. I didn't get the whole vampire thing, though, of him, like, randomly biting people. That was a bit weird. But,
that was a bit odd.
Actually, having said that, they kind of do have some kind of blood fetish on the show, because in the last season, you've got, what's his face? With the blood hair and you know, chopping horses and stuff.
Yeah, they have a thing for blood.
They do. This is kind of blood and rectangular shields. It's exposed. All right, let's do 2 more questions. I mean, this one we can answer very quickly. Were the Saxon helmet, chainmail, and overall gear realistic in the show? Not really, not at all.
No,
from what we can tell.
Well, the chainmail maybe. But
I'm not even sure about the chainmail. The way they interact with chainmail, just like in Vikings, is that they sort of slash someone with a sword and then they cut through the rings, and it's like, if that's proper chainmail, that's not happening at all. Did the Anglo-Saxons use square shield? No, they did not. They used round shields, just the same as the Danes did. Okay. The Arab explorer Ibn Fadlan mentioned the Varangians had tattoos. Okay, no utensils have been found regarding tattoos. Thanks, love your channel. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's a good point. The only issue with Ibn Fadlan is that we're not sure if, because it's the famous, the burial that he describes, and we're not sure if what he's describing are what we would recognize as Scandinavians. Potentially they're Volga Bulgars, or they were the Rus, who are kind of a mixed group of Scandinavians and Slavic peoples.
Well, yeah, so the tattoos could be a Slavic thing, but
quite possibly
that corroborative.
Yeah, corroboratory evidence. It is hard to tell. I think I need to look into that a bit more often, because I'm very sure that the answer will be out there. So if you have a look, I'm pretty sure the research has been done into tattoos in the Viking Age and things like this, and I'm fairly certain that there will have been some kind of tattooing that happened with the Viking peoples, but how and in what form, I'm not entirely sure. Okay. The Danes played many dice games. Do we know anything about them? Well, James, you know something about a particular Viking board game that you were incredibly good at on Lindisfarne when we were there for the archaeological dig.
Debatable, but I did enjoy it. Yeah, an Effeltafel. What a game! That doesn't involve dice though, but it involves small pieces. I presume it's fairly easy to carry around because you just need like a roll of cloth. I think that's. And that was how it was used. That's how the board was. Just these small pieces. And the pieces didn't have to be very ornate. They could just be, same coloured stones or whatever. So,
but they could be incredibly ornate, right?
Game that they had.
They they could be incredibly ornate, right? Like what we found. Well, I say we didn't find it personally, but we were there when it was found, so we're going to claim it. Yeah, on Lindisfarne. So we were digging at Lindisfarne this last summer on the archaeological dig site there, and one of the amazing things that was found was a glass gaming piece. So it's to play a board game like this, and it was this beautiful. It's about that big, and it's of blue glass, and it seems to be indeed that it's of a North Sea culture. We're not sure which one precisely that would be, but potentially Viking.
Shows that the elites were even playing these games, as well as commoners, probably.
Yeah, it does. It's potentially evidence for Scandinavians on Lindisfarne, in the early 9th century, I think is when they dated this to, or for contact between the. Obviously, you've got a very strong clerical community on Lindisfarne with the monastic community, with the monastery there. So it's potentially the higher-ups there being in contact with people of a Scandinavian material culture, and that they were then importing these games and playing these games on the island. So that's quite a cool connection there. All right, so, okay, last question. Were the Vikings strongest in terms of brute strength in their time?
Ooh.
What kind of angle would you take on that?
I'd tend to go with no. I feel like in terms of raw military strength, the Vikings weren't that different to the Anglo-Saxons, but in terms of tactics,
right,
that's where they really, had their impact.
I
would say so. Fundamentally, a Viking soldier compared to an Anglo-Saxon soldier, but it depends what we define an Anglo-Saxon soldier as, whether as a Ferdman or a Hearthguard or whatever. It definitely varies, but I feel like the average warrior might not have been too different. It's just all about tactics, I would say.
I think you're probably right, and I think in shows like Vikings and to a degree in The Last Kingdom, they show the Vikings as being sort of superhuman in a way, that they are capable of doing these amazing feats, and they sort of shove once and 10 Saxons fly off into the air. But likelihood is that in terms of strength, physicality, they wouldn't be all that different. Now there is some argument to be made that Scandinavians would be a bit hencher, and this might be because of course they did a lot of rowing, so it's possible that meant that they were bigger, stronger, better at fighting. Also because a lot of the Great Heathen Army, they had been raiders beforehand. A lot of them were stationed in Frisia, again shouting out my dissertation. Others had been in Ireland raiding Francia, for example, so they might have been more what we might consider career warriors, but that's a tricky term to use. But I think you hit the nail on the head there, James, when you say that the tactics are more important in a lot of ways. Because I think that the Vikings, what made them deadly was that they when they attacked and where. So they used the rivers, of course, to cut inland, and then they would often leave their ships and then attack somewhere and be gone very quickly. So that was the hit-and-run raiding attacks. What they did with the Great Heathen Army was they would sail somewhere or march over a road or acquire horses, as we talked about earlier. They would capture a fortified location or build fortifications like they did at Repton or Reading or Nottingham, and then they would simply wait for the Anglo-Saxon army to appear. The Anglo-Saxon army would be there. It would be the fjord, so it would be people called up from the fields. And if they fought them one-on-one, sometimes they'd win, but a lot of the times the Vikings lost if they fought one-on-one against the Anglo-Saxons. But they kind of knew that they would then have to go back, and they would have to go to their farms and collect up the harvest, and so they knew that they could sit in there for a while and then they'd be gone, and that's how the Great Heathen Army was able to conquer so much. But then I think with Alfred, he figures this out. He builds up the Burgle system, so he builds these buri everywhere, these bur, and these towns. He has the population split into three. A third is manning the bur, the other third is the field arm, and the other third is out in the fields collecting the harvest and doing work and whatnot. And under Edward the Elder as well, he makes mincemeat of the Danes that are in the Danelaw. He captures so many of them and exploits their weaknesses of not being strong together, not being connected, being all these small armies that are separated and in these various strongholds and towns, and then bit by bit he you can read it in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. He retakes these lands, and Ethelfled and Ethelred in Mercia do something similar. So I think it really depends what period and when, but
definitely.
there is a different in tactic. I think is what made them so lethal in the early Viking Age. And they build up different tactics later, like demanding Javol, or as it's often called now, Danegeld, so that they'd come and they'd demand money. That's a very different tactic to what they were doing in the 9th century, for example, but that's a later tactic developed. All right, I think
Exactly.
I'm going to leave it there, unless there's something burning on the tip of your tongue that you really want to shout and tell everyone about, James. Last Kingdom Viking related.
I can't think of anything. This is my platform, but nothing on the top of my head.
I mean, I'm sure we can do this again at some point, hopefully with less of the kerfuffle of trying to actually get this sorted out and figure out how the live stream works and everything, because we are just a pair of massive boomers, or, well, I'm more of a boomer, I guess. At least you have the cool headset, I'm just... I
am a cool gamer boy, it's true.
Yeah, I mean, I've just got, 80s bands, 70s bands on my posters on my wall behind me, so I'm not helping the boomer case here. But thank you very much for joining us, everyone, and for asking the questions and for being patient with us at the start. I hope this has been somewhat interesting and not too spoilery. I think we tried to keep it mostly to historical stuff rather than book stuff, as much as possible. But yeah, anyway, thank you very much for joining us, and I need to figure out how to actually end this. That would probably be good. But not in that way. It's fine.
Me as well.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks very much for coming on.
Cool.
Yeah. All right, everyone. There, but thank you very much for watching. I'll have another normal video up on Saturday and then again on Wednesday. But feel free to comment if you really wanted to figure out one of the answers and you asked us and we didn't have time to get around to it. All right, everyone. From me, it's good night, and from James, it's
bye.
all right. Ta-ra.